hello, good evening, and I thank you for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. Breaking at this hour on offense, the Pentagon pummeling Iran, torpedoing an Iranian ship at sea, and unleashing brand new weapons of war by air. Also this evening, the White House's defense, telling NewsNation the commander-in-chief will define when victory is achieved. As the president says, America's military might is not slowing down.
If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. When crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen.
Also at this hour, to the rescue, the State Department scrambling to evacuate thousands of American citizens caught in the crossfire. We'll show you how they are getting out by the thousands. Plus, behind enemy lines, is there a secret plan in the works to try to overthrow the regime in Iran? How the White House is now responding to that question. A former undercover CIA agent joins us live. But first tonight, unrelenting and unprecedented firepower in the Middle East. And tonight, the White House telling NewsNation that more missiles are about to rain down on the Iranian regime.
Their missiles are being wiped out rapidly. Their launchers are being wiped out.
And amid the newest of technologies to disarm the oldest of foes, the Department of War today revealing an historic hit.
It was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
Retired Admiral Michael Smith here in moments. Joe Khalil reporting for us tonight as well. But first, over to the White House and our Kelly Meyer today. Kelly, a briefing that started off the day by the Pentagon, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then over at the White House. You were in the middle of the action there.
Yeah, from the Pentagon to the White House briefing room to the president's event this afternoon, the message was U.S. military missiles will be raining down on Iran, and President Trump indicating today they are not stopping anytime soon.
This is very important. This is very important, and we're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
The White House today expanding on the president's decision to attack Iran, saying the president had a good feeling the Iranians were going to strike U.S. assets in the region. President Trump says the U.S. is in a very strong position now, but a source familiar tells me tonight that the Iranians have been attempting to reach the U.S., but the U.S. is not answering. Blake.
Kelly Meyer, live for us over at 1600. Kelly, thank you. Live look now over at the Capitol. Lawmakers there today voting on whether or not to curb the president's power, or at least try to, as the ongoing strikes continue. The Senate voting late this afternoon. The House set to vote tomorrow. Our Joe Khalil up on the Hill, in which there's a whole lot of chatter and action tonight. Joe?
Yeah, Blake, the Republicans here in the Senate had successfully found enough votes to defeat this thing. It was close. It was basically a party line vote. They lost Rand Paul, but they picked up Democrat John Fetterman, and it was a 53-47 vote. Now, afterwards, we heard from several Republicans continuing to support these strikes, none more so than Senator Lindsey Graham. He was, frankly, fired up after this vote. Take a listen here, just a bit of what he told us.
There's zero chance that the Ayatollah would ever be a friend of America, would give up his ambitions to be a religious Nazi. The people that come after, you're going to go from zero to, I think, a much better chance. So this idea we can't defend ourselves unless you take over a country is BS.
Translation there, that regime change, according to Senator Graham, isn't necessarily what comes next after these strikes. Blake, meantime, Democrats we talked to afterward have said, look, everyone is now on the record. Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal told us that Republicans are going to now have to answer if public support for these strikes continues to go down. And he says that's something that Republicans will contend with, he believes, in the next couple of days and weeks as this progresses. Again, that House vote now tomorrow, largely we're expecting the same kind of result that we got today in the Senate.
Joe Kay, live for us, Capitol Hallways. Joe, thank you. All right, so I want to take a look here at where things stand and sort of walk you through it at this hour, as it's day 5 of the operations in Iran. The Pentagon today began sharing the total impact of Epic Fury's first 100 hours. Now, this is perhaps the most incredible move of the day. The U.S. sinking a submarine, an Iranian warship. This was off the coast of Southeast Asia. And the Pentagon says that this right here is the first time an American torpedo sank an enemy warship since World War II. Central Command says it is the 20th Iranian Navy ship to be taken out. And here's where many of the other 19 ships were struck. You can sort of take a look down here that was struck by the Navy, United States Navy, Bandar Abbas Military Harbor, one of those sites, where satellite images show just the precision of the targeting of the U.S. military might. We now have struck 20 of the Iranian Navy ships, dealing a big blow to its force. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper also detailing a historic first on the battlefield as the U.S. rolled out its brand new long-range precision strike missiles. It's those right there, and the U.S. dropping more than 2,000 munitions in Iran, a country that is roughly the size of the state of Alaska. And when you look at where these strikes are occurring, a massive area, about 650,000 square miles Iran is, you'll notice here that it's happening along the western border. This is the southwest part of Iran, and this is the northwest part of the country, and this is starting to take great importance. We'll talk about this throughout the hour. Many of those strikes targeting Iranian missile launchers and production facilities. Central Command releasing this video right here as well, showing the American military's campaign to seek and destroy the outposts. This is what you're seeing when I showed you those dots. This is the result of the targets. And tonight, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, says shots fired from Iran are down 86% from day one. Drone attacks down 73%. And he is now laying out where the operation heads next.
This progress has allowed CENTCOM to establish localized air superiority across the southern flank of the Iranian coast and penetrate their defenses with overwhelming precision and firepower. We will now begin to expand inland, striking progressively deeper into Iranian territory.
Joining us now, retired Rear Admiral Michael Smith, U.S. Navy. Admiral, thanks for being here with us. I hear the chairman there sort of outline how we are getting less firepower sent our way. We're sinking their warships. We're taking out their ammunition. How badly damaged tonight, basically 100 hours into this, is Iran?
Well, I think there's no question that the Iranian capabilities are being devastated. There's no doubt that our military remains the strongest military in the world. And if you took a look at all the war games we've ever done, I can't imagine any country has been war gamed more than Iran. So you are seeing just incredible capabilities being perfectly executed by an array of military services all around the goal of destroying Iran's capability to counter us.
When we heard from Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, first thing this morning, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff as well, they showed where we've been striking, and they put out this map, and it basically shows the whole west part of Iran, or not the whole, but a pretty substantial portion. And it's concentrated in the southwest along some of the ports and in the northwest. The northwest is becoming a story here in whether or not Kurdish forces might start moving in and you get a potential uprising there. Explain why the northwest part of that country is so important and why that's where the concentration of strikes are right now.
Well, I think you want to attack their capability to counter us and to counter Israel. So you want to go to the ballistic missile sites. You want to go to their air defense capabilities. You want to decimate their command and control. So you're going in, and as they talk about, you're going to roll them back so that we can go farther and farther. We have local air supremacy. That doesn't mean we have air supremacy over the entire country yet, but we're destroying their capability to counter our planes so we can reach deeper and deeper. And if the objective is to incite some sort of rebellion or some sort of overthrow of the government through the Kurds, you want to be able to destroy Iranian capabilities to stop the Kurds themselves as well.
I mentioned Pete Hegseth. He said today that this is the start, basically, that this has only just begun. Let's roll that, and then we'll pick it up on the other side.
We have only just begun to hunt, dismantle, demoralize, destroy, and defeat their capabilities, just 4 days in. Starting last night and to be completed in a few days, in under a week, the two most powerful air forces in the world will have complete control of Iranian skies, uncontested airspace.
We learned today, Admiral, that we used a torpedo against a submarine for the first time since World War II. But we also learned as well from Central Command that they rolled out the next generation precision strike missiles. This is the updated, the newest, the latest that we have. What are the capabilities of those, and how are we using them?
Well, I think that you're seeing that the Pentagon is willing to roll in everything we have. They're not holding anything back. It's all coordinated. It's all synchronized. And so you're going to have the high-end missiles, as they've announced today, and you're going to have what are our standard torpedoes we've had in inventory for a while. But it doesn't take a lot, as you see in that video, to destroy that ship. We need to get rid of the Iranian naval capability, both their Navy, which this frigate is part of, as well as the Revolutionary Guard Navy, which has the drones and the fast attack boats, so that we can then move the Navy up closer as well. And so we can make the sorties off the aircraft carrier that much shorter, and you can improve your combat capability.
Retired Admiral Michael Smith with us tonight. Thank you for breaking it all down with us. Appreciate it, sir. By the way, when you consider all the military might and the firepower, the U.S. and Israel have fired more than 2,000 munitions in the first 72 hours of this conflict. For context, the U.S. used 10,000 in the first month during the initial operations in Afghanistan after September 11th. So that there shows you the size and scope, as the Admiral talks about how we are emptying and unloading against Iran in just the opening hours here. All right, still to come, 17,000 Americans home safe from the Middle East, but thousands more still stuck there tonight as rockets and drones fly overhead.
The Iranians have shown that they are not going to hesitate to target civilians in the region.
Other side of the break, what it takes inside the operations to bring all of those Americans home safely. Plus, no mercy. The Secretary of War sets the state of play as the American military strikes deeper into the country. And the Commander-in-Chief welcoming tech leaders to the White House today, zeroing in on efforts to expand data center production. What that was all about and why it was on the president's minds throughout the hour.
There is some commercial flights that are taking off intermittently from these countries, and we plan to get Americans on board as quickly as possible, again, free of charge to them. And we have some additional measures that I think will be announced in the coming days.
The White House today as the U.S. issues evacuation orders across the Middle East, urging Americans in at least 16 different countries to leave immediately as the war widens. The White House telling NewsNation the administration is chartering flights for approximately somewhere in the area of about 1,600 Americans that are stranded abroad and asking to come home as they fear for what could potentially take place next across the Middle East.
They ushered us into the bomb shelters there at the airport. We got the sirens and the warnings going off of incoming missiles, and they give you, 6 or 8 or 10 minutes to get to the bomb shelter.
We were at the border for about 6 hours getting across because so many people were evacuating into Jordan.
More than 17,000 Americans have already evacuated and safely returned home from the Middle East. That includes more than 8,000 Americans on just Tuesday alone. With us now, Colin O'Brien. He is the Deputy Vice President of Operations at Global Guardian, which has helped evacuate clients all across the Middle East. Colin, good on you. I know you've been busy. You've evacuated thousands of people.
We have.
How does this work?
So Global Guardian was positioned even prior to this conflict, where we have teams positioned in 170 countries. And so when an event like this happens, we activate our teams immediately. We identify our client base, and we're working with them to figure out what the safest option is. So when Saturday morning occurred and the first missiles were fired, the immediate order was shelter in place so that we could ascertain what was happening. As soon as we were able to identify that we had movement options, which airspaces were going to be closed, where we could go to get away from missile and drone attacks, our teams were immediately activated, and then we started moving people across land borders into places like Oman, parts of Saudi Arabia that were not under attack.
If someone's watching this and they have a friend or a family member or a colleague, someone in the Middle East who's trying to get out, what's the best course of action right now? What would the advice be?
Right now, still the best advice, if you don't have a plan, is to shelter in place until you can develop a plan. It's as you look at what capabilities exist, I know the State Department is trying to help and move additional assets into the place, but you do have private security firms, Global Guardian included, that are well positioned right now and have been moving nonstop since Saturday morning when the missiles started being fired to get people out of those danger areas.
Here was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, earlier today.
First, it's a great opportunity to encourage everybody in the region to go to the State Department and register. We've also opened up space available seats as C-17s and other airplanes come in to try to help folks get out. But that's really a State Department matter.
So the government is trying. Obviously, the government thinks about the safety of Americans and, of course, the troops overseas first and foremost. How successful do you think they will be able to be by bringing C-17s potentially over there and flying Americans out, I don't want to say en masse, but clearly by the dozens or hundreds?
I think they're going to have real challenges. Part of the problem we have right now is most of the airspace is restricted and shut down. So when you look at places like Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, we can't land planes because the airspace is still contested with missiles and drones. So you have to not just get planes there, you have to get people to where the planes are. And the State Department doesn't have the assets, the vehicles, the helicopters that could take someone from Bahrain to Western Saudi Arabia, or to take them from Qatar into Oman or the UAE into Oman, where we can get to a safe airport that's functioning with the airspace open and then move them. And that's where our security firm is able to bridge that gap.
Can we put that map up again? Because these are the countries right now where folks are trying to get out. It's everywhere from, Israel and Egypt to Syria and Yemen. It's obviously not one size fits all.
No, it's not. And each country has its own challenges. So if you're evacuating from Israel, for example, you have two options, really. It's Jordan and you have Egypt. But that's all going to depend on what passports you have. When you look at places like the UAE, you have people that are restricted in movement because of visa situations, that I can go to Oman for some or I can go to Saudi Arabia for another. So there is no one size fits all. So you're working through all these problem sets and figuring out the different directions you can go. And problem solving in real time
is got to be tough in this environment.
I think I've slept about 90 minutes since Friday.
All right. Well, good on you. You're trying to get folks out of there. 3,000, right?
Yes.
Wow. Incredible. All the best, Colin.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate it. Get some sleep when you can. Still to come, new questions tonight about NATO. Could it be drawn into a wider war with Iran as the White House mulls potentially sending in American troops? And the CIA. Could it be key to regime change in Iran? What they could do to possibly bring about an uprising in Tehran from an intelligence officer who has worked covertly in that region when we return. Approaching 6:30 here in Washington, 1:30 in the morning in parts across the Middle East tonight, as it is day 5 of war in Iran, raging throughout the Middle East, but now expanding, at least in part, to the Asian seas as well. That right there, footage earlier today of a U.S. submarine striking and sinking an Iranian warship off the southern coast of Sri Lanka. Officials there say that ship was headed back to Iran from the eastern Indian port when it was hit. An Iranian ballistic missile going the other way, shot down by NATO as it was headed for Turkey, a NATO member that shares a 300-mile-long border with Iran. That issue raising big questions tonight about potentially NATO's defense clause and drawing, could it, the alliance's 32 member states into the war, as an attack on one is in theory an attack on all. Our Connell McShane, host of NewsNation Live, on the ground for us in Istanbul, Turkey tonight. Connell, you were headed there to begin with, and then as you landed, the big story there today was this missile that flew in that direction and ended up getting intercepted.
Well, I think it came as a surprise to a lot of people, including us, Blake, quite frankly, because it's not what you would expect here. You're just barely moving your way into the Middle East, and you think in a city like Istanbul that you wouldn't have to worry about something like this, and quite frankly, you probably wouldn't. This city has been fairly normal tonight. You know, we're broadcasting from a location where there happens to be a soccer stadium over my left shoulder. Now it's 2:30 in the morning, so the game is well over. But earlier tonight, you know, the big signs going up, goal, goal, they scored. You know, so it was just a normal night in Istanbul. So to see the nation of Turkey dragged into this, even on the periphery, was a surprise because of the fact, as you mentioned, it's a NATO ally. Now, there have been conflicting reports on this. There's been some from the Turkish officials saying that this missile they think may have been aimed at a British base in Cyprus, like we saw the other day, and it just went off course. So people are trying to talk this back, downplay it as much as possible. Even Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, did the same thing when Article 5 was brought up in his briefing earlier.
Connell, what's the sense that you're getting from folks there in Turkey on how they are viewing all of this?
Well, I don't know if you saw, we had a guy on last hour on our show. I thought it was really interesting. This guy that was, has been living here in Istanbul for about 10 years, but he used to lead protest movements literally in Iran. The guy was like a movie producer there, and he was really involved in some of the previous protest movements, of course, that pop up every so often. And, you know, he was an interesting guy to talk to. There's a huge Iranian contingent or population here in Turkey in general, like 75,000, and probably maybe 25, 35,000 of them are in the city of Istanbul. So there's a lot of Iranians here to begin with. He had this certain sense of optimism mixed with a lot of kind of nervousness and skepticism. But he talked openly. He was obviously against the regime. It's actually why he came here, about going back and hoping to lead an uprising again. But, you know, he's also worried about his family, who he's trying to get in touch with and having trouble communicating with.
You know, we just did a segment, of course, one of the big stories is Americans trying to get out, and the State Department saying that they're still trying to help about 1,600 Americans get out of the Middle East. You're doing the opposite. You're there and trying to move around, and I'm sort of curious as you're in the region and trying to get closer to sort of get the perspectives all across the Middle East, what travel is like there for you.
It's tough. I mean, it's tough. We have all those areas on the map that you're showing there where the airspace is completely closed, and others, especially along the Gulf, where, you know, it's limited. But, you know, these are important stories to tell, so we think that getting as close as possible, for example, to the Strait of Hormuz. We had a Dubai-based correspondent who had made his way to Oman on our show earlier. I thought it was very valuable, because that's like a huge economic story that if it continues, you know, it could really, really have implications that are far-reaching, you know, as you know. So we'd like to try to get there. So we're going to give it a shot this weekend, maybe go down and try to get to either Oman or possibly to Dubai and try to tell that story. But it's challenging right now, as the people going the other way have seen. So we'll see how it goes. But again, I think it's a story worth telling, so we'll do our best.
Connell McShane for us tonight. Connell, we'll catch you tomorrow. And by the way, you can watch Connell 3 to 6 Eastern throughout the day live from the Middle East. Connell, thank you. Well, the White House says the commander-in-chief will attend the dignified transfer honoring the 6 service members killed in action.
We grieve for these American patriots and their families as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. President Trump intends to attend the dignified transfer of these American heroes to stand in grief alongside their families.
4 of the fallen were identified on Tuesday, and the White House confirms that the commander-in-chief also plans to call each of their families. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, said today that the names of the other 2 heroes will be released after their families have been properly notified. As the fighting continues, the White House facing questions on the end goal for the war. The press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, telling our Libby Dean today about what victory could potentially look like in the Middle East.
A victory will be determined by the commander-in-chief once the goals and the objectives that we have repeatedly laid out are fully realized. Again, we just, in the next few hours, will be achieving that dominance over the skies, which means the United States military will be raining missiles and weapons down on Iran to hit these specific targets.
By the way, those next few hours are now. With us now, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump in the first term, Victoria Coates, and retired Major General Dana Petard, who served on 4 combat tours in Iraq. General, thanks for being with us. Victoria, nice to see you. Here's, as we keep our eyes on Beirut, Lebanon, and across the Middle East tonight, I want to focus in on some of the numbers that we learned today, because here it is from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. We learned, Victoria, and I'll start with you, that when it comes to missiles, Iran fired 219 on day 1. It's 31 on day 4. Drones, nearly 800 on day 1, and it's down to about 200 on day 4. So it's coming down. That's the good sign. That shows the American military dominance. And I'm curious when you think that could potentially get to 0 or as close to it as possible.
No, this is a very dramatic sort of de-escalation, Blake. And what this shows us is the degradation of the Iranian capabilities. So, yes, I mean, they started with a certain number. We've come down about 75%.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they're now going for those very high-end targets. They're going for our embassy in Riyadh. They're going for a consulate in Dubai. They're going for our assets in Turkey and in Cyprus. So this is still a menace. This is something we have to pay a lot of attention to. But fortunately, it looks like we are both able to degrade them on the ground in Iran, and that's especially important for missile defense because that allows us to fly a lot of different kinds of aircraft in to hit other targets as that's successful. But we still have to be mindful that they do have an arsenal to fire off.
General?
Yeah, it's encouraging numbers, and I concur with what Victoria just said. I mean, first of all, air dominance is what must take place, air superiority, so that both American and Israeli aircraft can fly with impunity across Iran, which will allow them to do other things, such as destroy the ballistic missile sites and launchers, and also to destroy the Iranian Navy, because that will impact, obviously, the Straits of Hormuz. And that will then set the conditions, really, for the possibility of a regime change from the Iranian people.
You talk about the conditions. One of the big questions, obviously, from an American perspective going forward, as we see this military might on display from the air and from the water. For example, the first torpedo to take out a submarine since World War II. The question then becomes about the possibility of boots on the ground. Here was the administration earlier today.
Thus far, Operation Epic Fury has delivered twice the air power of shock and awe of Iraq in 2003, minus Paul Bremer and the nation building.
Well, they're not part of the plan for this operation at this time, but I certainly will never take away military options on behalf of the President of the United States or the Commander-in-Chief, and he wisely does not do the same for himself.
Victoria, you know this. A Trump White House never takes the options off the table militarily, right? It's kind of a standard line out of them. So do you think that truly all options are on the table at this point in time, or that's not one that we eventually go down the path of?
Well, I would just say, I mean, I agree with Caroline. Of course, you're not going to take an option off the table. Right. And who knows? I mean, 72 hours ago, we couldn't have imagined being here. So right. we don't know where we're going to be in 72 hours. And so, I mean, the Commander-in-Chief has all of his options. That said, it doesn't seem even remotely likely that U.S. boots on the ground in any kind of significant numbers will be necessary, because this bombing campaign has been so successful. And I mean, Secretary Hegseth was 100% correct. I mean, this is so much stronger than shock and awe in 2003 that toppled Saddam Hussein so quickly. So this is a demonstration of American might that no one else can meet. And having this be successful, having it wind up, and then giving the Iranian people, as the president has said repeatedly, every opportunity, their best opportunity to take their government back, that's the whole point here.
General, do you completely rule it out as well?
You know, I agree. Don't take any options off right now. But just a reminder, in 2003, the shock and awe campaign was followed by a ground campaign. I mean, it was a combination of the two that defeated Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein. Just a lesson back, if you go back to 1980 when Saddam Hussein attacked Iran, it was very successful. And Iran everyone thought was defeated, but Iran never capitulated. And it led to an 8-year war. So we just need to be careful. I mean, compelling 90 million people to surrender from the air isn't. I'm not sure that's going to be able to take place.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, General and Victoria. I don't know if you're watching with me, but the camera just panned over there to the right, and what we saw in Beirut appeared to be, Haley, did I get that right? It looked like there were some, it looked like there were some missile launches as it's 1:40 in Beirut, and you can see the smoke rising there, it appears, in the center of your screen. It was, if you were just watching us, it was the top right portion of your screen. And I just want to keep this picture up for a moment there. Let's listen. So you heard I even... And I'm just stopping myself because I'm hearing some of this in the background. And I guess, Victoria, this goes to show the ongoing campaign from Israel to try to target Hezbollah.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the, I think, interesting stories in this, Blake, is what we had been told for years and years is that the regional proxies of Iran were going to drag us all into some kind of broader Middle East war. And that really hasn't happened. I mean, Hamas has been silent. The Houthi have, to date, and now that can change, but to date have just issued verbal threats. And Hezbollah has not launched these tens of thousands of precision-guided missiles that we've all been concerned about. So it's very interesting seeing how the narrative is borne out with the terrorist proxies as opposed to what was predicted.
All right. Beirut, Lebanon, 1:42 in the morning. Victoria Coates, retired Major General Dana Petard, appreciate your perspective and staying with us here as we keep our eyes on Beirut. Here's what we're going to do. Quick break. Other side, Tracy Walder. There's a real question tonight about how active, if at all, the CIA might be involved in this. Our coverage continues, when I say this, meaning potentially in Iran in the coming days and trying to lead to a potential uprising there. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation. Stay with us.
NewsNation Tonight. Bill O'Reilly, Stephen A. Smith, Chris Cuomo.
I like to learn. I like to get smarter. You think I'm not going to call Bill O'Reilly and listen to him? You think I'm not going to call Chris Cuomo and listen to him?
Tonight, 8, 7 Central on Cuomo, only on NewsNation.
All right, so if you were watching us live moments ago, this was what some of our cameras captured. You can see missiles there flying in the background. This is Beirut, Lebanon, and the Israeli Defense Forces confirming moments ago they hit Hezbollah targets inside of Lebanon. Just some of the scenes as our coverage continues. There you saw the camera pan over and some of the action there in Beirut tonight as our coverage continues here on NewsNation. There was a question over at the White House briefing today about whether or not the President of the United States has agreed to some sort of a deal with Kurdish forces, northwest part of the country there in Iran, to potentially lead some sort of an uprising. Here was how the White House responded to that earlier today.
The president has held many calls with partners, allies, and leaders in the region, in the Middle East. He did speak to Kurdish leaders with respect to our base that we have in northern Iraq. But as for any report suggesting that the president has agreed to any such plan is completely false.
Former undercover CIA officer Tracy Walder with me now. And Tracy, look, first off, nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Seeing that the CIA has been reportedly pretty busy in the last few months, whether it be Venezuela and Maduro, El Mencho with intelligence there in Mexico, and now there's reports coming out tonight about possible Kurdish movement in the Northwest. I wanted to get your perspective on what you think the agency could be involved with tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Blake. I think the first thing is, listen, the Iranian regime's like a hydra, right? So you cut off the head, which essentially they did with the leadership over multiple strikes. The problem is to really squash the regime, if you will, you have to have boots on the ground. That really endangers the lives of American troops. And so the reality is we have worked with Kurdish forces all over the Middle East, in Syria, in Iraq, and now potentially in Iran, to essentially be those boots on the ground. They have a vested interest in seeing this regime toppled.
Is it your experience that this could be the possible game changer of some sort of movement from that region? And if so, sort of how might American forces vis-a-vis the CIA sort of get that ball moving?
So listen, ultimately, yes, and that's such a good question. I do think that this could definitely change the tide and really topple the regime. But in the long run, do I think that it's good that we are working with them? Probably not. It never tends to go well when we do arm a lot of these groups. It usually devolves into infighting and fighting us, quite frankly. So I don't know that it will work out well in the long run, but yes, in terms of bringing down the entirety of the regime and invoking regime change, yes, it could be effective.
Tracy, as you were talking, this is a live picture of Beirut, Lebanon, and about 5 seconds ago, right side of the screen, we saw more missiles there being launched. Again, Israel confirming just moments ago that this is against Hezbollah targets in Beirut, Lebanon. This started to pick up in the last, 5, 6, 7 minutes or so. It's 1:51 there in Israel and in Lebanon tonight. We know from the White House today, they talked about how missiles were going to be raining down on Iran in the upcoming hours. And again, live look, you can see it there on the other side. They said that missiles would be raining down on Iran in the upcoming hours. Those upcoming hours are now. And as we watch in Beirut, Lebanon, you see Israel and their continuing operations. Tracy Walder, thank you for the perspective. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation, other side of the break. All right, it is 1:56 in the morning, Beirut, Lebanon. About 15 minutes or so ago, we started seeing missiles flying into Beirut. Israeli Defense Forces saying that they have indeed struck Hezbollah targets, or at least are presuming those strikes against Hezbollah targets. If you're just joining us tonight, this was some of the scene just moments ago. All right, so that was just moments ago. That's on the Israeli front. We also learned throughout the day today from American officials on just how much they are penetrating inside of Iran and just how successful those attacks are. For example, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, revealing today, along with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, that Iranian missile strikes are down roughly 80% from day 1 to day 4. Same with drone strikes, down in the same vicinity as well. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying that now what the United States military is trying to do, or is going to do at this point in time, is move inland.
This progress has allowed CENTCOM to establish localized air superiority across the southern flank of the Iranian coast and penetrate their defenses with overwhelming precision and firepower. We will now begin to expand inland, striking progressively deeper into Iranian territory.
Dan Kane earlier today, and then hours after that, we heard from the commander-in-chief, President Trump, who described the actions there as the missiles being wiped out in Iran, then saying this.
This is very important. This is very important, and we're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
That at an event at the White House earlier this afternoon. So where does it go from here? Our coverage continues here on NewsNation. Elizabeth Vargas is up next. She is speaking with the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, about who could succeed Iran's late Ayatollah. That's coming up just seconds away here on NewsNation. I thank you so much for being with us tonight here on the Hill. I'm Blake Burman, from Iran to Israel to the Middle East and back at home. I thank you for trusting us with your coverage, with staying with us as we continue our coverage here on NewsNation. I'll be back here tomorrow. Live look, Beirut, Lebanon. But until then, I send it over to Elizabeth, who takes it over from here.